Big Bang Theory. We read about this in physics. 300,000 years later, the concept of atom and molecule came in. Subsequent to that, the molecules combined together to form what is called organism. And some of these organisms, about 70,000 years back, came to existence through a Homo sapiens as species and started shaping up the culture. All of you must be wondering, why am I talking about this whole context? That was the design of this universe. That is where we came from. Here today, we are talking about the redesign the universe, the redesign the world. And who better can do this than a prolific thinker, a public servant, inventor, entrepreneur who had a revered career, and above all, what I like in him, and when I was reading about his sort of biography, what I like in him is a family man. He has adorable children, two of them, the grandchildren who revered him, and I think he continues to inspire all of us all the time. He's worked with two prime ministers in India. He's actually set up many of the think tanks. He's been instrumental, actually having more than 75 patents on his name. We're very honored to have you, Dr. Sam Pitroda. Welcome, sir. Before we start this discussion, Sam, I just want to ask you, how have you been doing during this COVID times?
Ratnesh, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Gaurav, thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Chicago. Ratnesh, I'm doing pretty well. I didn't get a chance to go out of my home for almost 14 months. I was locked up. The last travel I had was March 2nd, 2020. And while I was locked up in the house, I sort of decided to write a book. And when I say I was locked up, I literally did not leave my home except my mailbox. Did not drive because my children will call me every day and check if I had been out. And I was afraid of them. So I decided to stay, and somebody used to deliver groceries, and my wife and I just got locked in. So it was a difficult period, like for all of us, and we learned new things in life. I told my wife that, look, you have been cooking all your life, so I'm going to now cook every day. So I cook for last 14 months. It was an interesting turn in my life, and I made best out of this situation, but it has been very difficult for many people. We all lost our loved ones in some form or the other, friends, families, and it has been a traumatic experience for all of us.
Sam, tell us about a brief introduction, just as about to know what inspired for you to write this book, and what's really in this book in a very brief summary. We'll go into the question answer for the next 45 minutes. We will have some discussion too, but tell us about this book.
Okay, thank you for asking this question, because I was born in 1942, just at the time world was being designed. And when I looked at my own journey of last 79 years, I realized that lots of things happened. One, in my life, for example, transistor was born after I was born. I had never used telephone in my life before coming to America. I had never seen television in my life before coming to America. So when I looked at this path of telecom revolution, of which I have been a party to some extent, I realized that hyperconnectivity is changing everything around us, but in a very subtle way. It is changing our relationships. Like I have grandchildren in California, and for last 14 months, our relationship has developed through video connections. We talk to each other 3 times a day. Never thought that something like this will evolve in our relationship. So hyperconnectivity is changing everything, our education, our health, our governance. It is changing business models, how we buy. It is changing products. So I started asking questions as to what is the role of hyperconnectivity going forward. Unfortunately, we use hyperconnectivity today to do things we have been doing in the past, better, cheaper, faster. But we don't use hyperconnectivity to do things we have never done before. We don't know what those are yet. And that led me to the design of the world, saying world was last designed at the time I was born. That design was led by US, which gave birth to UN, World Bank, NATO, WTO, WHO, GDP, GNP, per capita income. And that design created set of rules. And US gave this world rule-based order. That rule-based order has done pretty well. It has improved longevity, decreased infant mortality, created wealth, technology has become pervasive, but it has also created a lot of inequality, hasn't solved the problem of hunger. It has created environmental blunders. So then I started digging into it a little bit, and I've been doing this for almost last 7, 8 years, and realized that the design was based on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. Then world was bipolar, Soviet Union and US. But right after the design, world got decolonized completely, led by Mahatma Gandhi. With Indian independence, the whole world got decolonized in a short span of 25 years. No one had thought that that will happen so fast in 42. I was born in British Raj. Then rise of China, fall of Soviet Union, fall of Berlin Wall, rise of technology. Technology has become pervasive. Rise of inequality. 9/11, which was a response to perhaps a unipolar world. And then finally, COVID-19. COVID-19 tells us that we are all interconnected, interwoven, interdependent. And what happens in one part of the world affects everybody. And that led me to think about questioning this design and saying, what should be the new design? Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a politician. I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm just an ordinary guy who decided to look at things from an ordinary perspective. The book I wrote is not for great scholars. It is not an analytical book. It is just a bunch of ideas. At times, it looks like a random painting, abstract. But it is a presentation of my thoughts on how would I like to shape the world. At times, it may look idealistic, but I want some idealistic tone. And that's sort of a quick
Sure.
summary. I'm sure we'll explore more as we go along.
Sure. Sam, I started this whole context by sharing with you and the audience how this universe has been shaped up over the years. About 12,000 years back, the whole cognitive revolution leading to the revolution of agriculture coming in, and in about last 500 years, the scientific, evolution, which has given us great things, but also has given us grief, which you were mentioning about. Now, in this period of time, we've seen extremes. So we've seen the pandemics, world wars, deaths, climate changing, and my reflection when I was reading your book. Very interesting read. In fact, it took me to sitting to finish the book because it was so engrossing. I was wondering then when you look at the whole framework of design, objective, and vision. So, if you go back in a context which I was actually talking about, that what's been the vision of this humanity and how does this whole cognitive and evolution, scientific evolution happen? When you looking at redesigning the world, and when you take a context of some country like US, and I think you were very fondly writing about great things US has done, and you actually also the leadership such as Roosevelt, you've actually kind of mentioned the how sort of progressive he was. But it is also a little oxymoronic to see that the US, who actually as a country shaped up a new narrative, and post World War II, uh, is also the one who creators of many problems. Whole consumerism, which is leading to all this climate crisis, and for us to kind of rethink the way we should be thinking about the universe, is essentially at a very hyper side as far as US as a country is concerned. Capitalism and the fact that you continue to progress and consume, and I think you mentioned about this in your book, that is that a consumer or is that a conservation you're talking about? How do you really kind of see the balance, of what a country such as US has placed in the past, and we will have more discussion as we progress. Give us your thoughts that how a country who actually was shaping up the narrative but also was involved in terms of creating many of the problems which we have today.
I think part of the problem is that when US and other leaders shape the narrative, they tend to focus on their benefits as opposed to global benefits. It is about US growth. You saw the meeting at G7. President of US talked about what is good for US and not what is good for humanity. I think at some point in time, US must lead, or somebody else must lead, to really look at things that matter to entire humanity. So the core idea in the book is there are only two things that matter in life: planet and people. Planet doesn't need us, we need planet. So we must really take care of our planet, which include air we breathe, water we drink, forests we have, global warming, all of that. And there, it is not a question of what is good for India or what is good for US or what is good for China. It is what is good for all of us. If you take that little further, we have to say, somebody needs to worry about humanity. Everybody can't say that what is good for America or China is good for the world. So today you have really two main designs or visions of the world. American vision, which is based on extending the design of the 40s, and Chinese vision, which is about Belt and Road Initiative. China giving loans to everybody, going out and building the country and improving relationship and controlling, resources and all that. But it's all about what is good for China. You will never hear global leaders talking about what is good for humanity. They all come to visit country more as a marketing head. They all come there and talk about deals, trade, business, investments, defense contracts. They never talk about poverty. They never talk about food. They never talk about crime, violence. So I think our mindset still is coming from colonial mindset. We want to control. It's command and control. And that narrative has to change to communication, collaboration, cooperation, co-creation. And it's not idealistic. It is very fundamental. So when some people say, oh, it is utopian. No, it is not utopian. Okay. It is need of the hour. I believe human civilization has come to a point we can sort our differences across the table. We don't need nuclear warheads to sort out our differences. We are intelligent now. We have arrived. And with hyperconnectivity, there are different ways to solve our conflicts and not build machine guns and tanks and submarines. And, this is ridiculous. But that's the way we are. Okay. We spend $2 trillion a year on defense. All we need is 200 billion a year to eliminate hunger all over the world. Why can't we do that? I mean, what prevents us from doing it? Except that we are so locked up in this old paradigm. We don't want to change because everybody's milking it. So rich people are milking the existing paradigm. They have no desire to change. And they are the one who can change. So I always say that it is difficult to change because people in the position of power have no need to change. People who have need to change have no voice in the system. So you have this conflict. How do you convince rich people and powerful people to change? Because they are milking the system. And they don't want to let it go. And when you talk like this, they think you are a rebel. No, you are just human. So don't label things with all the traditional labels, which is, liberal, conservative, okay, communist, sort of, Democrat. Don't label anything. Just think about two things: planet and people. All labels have no meaning to me. It is not about promoting capitalism or state-controlled economy. The point is, it is not about economy only. Today, the global conversation is all about geopolitical conflicts, economy, growth, investment, technology. I would like to shift that conversation to environment, hunger, and a lot of the human issues.
Sure. Sam, on this, I think you've also suggested while reading this book in a time such as now, where we're actually looking in terms of our wave three, whether it will come or not. I was reading through your book, and then there's this whole concept of global governance, global leadership. You talk about what we have seen in history, both uh, pandemic such as what has happened during the Spanish flu time in India, very close cholera breakout, what we saw in the World War I and World War II, the deaths in millions. These are the non-connected world, right? Now you talk about hyperconnectivity and therefore a rise of global governance and global leadership. And when we go deeper, it looks really utopian. And I think you used this word a little while ago, to think about a governance of one, because here there is an extreme nationalism building across the world, which we see every country is trying to look at their own interest first. And case an example for us, the whole medicine, the whole jab, whole the whole COVID times. And I think when we looked at that, we also see this whole nationalist interest coming first, and this whole within that nationalist interest to think about a global governance and global leadership seems to be impossible and really, really utopian. We can start the conversation, but it looks impossible for actually shifting these thinking because it is underlining many other narrative of the countries. They're looking in terms of their own set of power structure as well. How are these global organizations playing there? So how do you really suggest that this could ever be the real or reality we can shape up, whether through the narrative or would this technology or bottoms up approach would help us, where the people would start kind of a revolution and a good play of climate, and people would actually result, the climate crisis recognition and the people bringing in the revolution would actually consist something which is a third front? Is that kind of imagination you're actually looking at?
First of all, nothing is impossible. I'm eternal optimistic. Hyperconnectivity has gotten us to a point we can dream differently. For the first time in the human history, we are all connected, essentially. Somebody could say, well, there is no connectivity in, Northeast or some other part of Africa, or even in US. That's a separate issue. But essentially, all 7.8 billion people are connected. What does this connectivity mean? Do we really want to lift human civilization to the next level? Or we want to just keep it the way it is, keep fighting, keep arguing, talk about national pride, talk about foreign enemy, talk about, all this petty stuff from the past? Or we rise above all that and look at larger issues, saying we are part of a global community. You cannot isolate yourself. Corona crisis has shown us that we are all connected. You couldn't isolate COVID-19. You could not create a border for COVID-19. What border are we talking about? We breathe same air. We drink same water. So I think we better understand that all of the old values have to change. I mean, what is my nationality? I live in America for 55 years. I had American passport. I was American citizen. I became Indian citizen. What does it really mean? It's a travel document. I live in Chicago. I worry about India. I worry about Africa. I work in Mexico. I have a project in Portugal. Okay. I am a global citizen. I worry about everything. I worry about what happens in China. I worry about what happens in Soviet Union or Russia. Why not? Don't label me. Okay. So I think this whole idea of rise of nationalism is really a response to hyperconnectivity. People are threatened. And that's why they want to go back to hold on to something. To me, it is part of a knee-jerk reaction to hyperconnectivity. We need globalization, but we also need localization. And there is no conflict between globalization and localization. There are certain things we'll have to have local. And there are certain things we'll have to globalize. It is not black and white. Nothing is black and white. Everything is shades of gray. And we have to decide which shade of gray. So when people talk about, patriotism, what does it mean? Okay. An immediate discussion would be like in America when Trump was here as a president, it was enemy at the border. Immigrants are, bad. How can you say that? Okay, they are human beings. So I think the narrative has to change. Everywhere narrative is divisive. Okay. You are Hindu. I'm Muslim. You are Christian. I'm Jew. That's one narrative. Okay. You are black. I'm white. You are brown. You are yellow. Another narrative. Third, you are from Africa. I'm from Europe. I'm from Asia. Third narrative. Fourth, you're rich. I'm poor. Okay. You're educated. I'm not educated. You're urban. I'm rural. So I think we tend to put people in boxes as opposed to saying we are all human beings. We'll all have different experiences. And that's the beauty of our diversity as human civilization. We all came from same place. We all have two eyes, two ears, and look at the genetic makeup of all of us. It's basically same. It's not very different from gorilla. So believe in science. Believe in rational thinking. Get off this old colonial mindset that I want to control you. I'm in power. I have more money. I'm going to decide this. I think it may take 50 years, but you got to start somewhere. And that can only happen with young people like you. Okay, I'm too old for it. I'm not going to see the change in my lifetime. But I believe people like you will drive the change. I have great faith in young people in this world. I mean, earlier you and I talked, you went to school in or university in Chicago at Kellogg. You're a global citizen. You know what's going on in America every day. You are connected. Okay. It's not that you are not loyal to America and you are only loyal to India. If something happens in America, Black Lives Matter, I know it affects you. I know you take interest in it. And it's good. So we must get off this old paradigm of dividing people, categorizing people. I think
Sure.
hyperconnectivity also promotes some fundamental human empowerment. Hyperconnectivity is all about democratization, decentralization, and demonetization. And that's why I have great faith in hyperconnectivity, that it is going to empower you and me. And we'll have opinion on China also. Chinese may
Sure.
not like it. That's okay. That's perfectly all right. Okay. And everybody is going to feel that I'm responsible for this. Okay. See, if a child is hurt in a car accident, we won't go and ask, what's your nationality? What's your, religion? We will just lift that child because it's human. So one is hyperconnectivity is going to promote
Sure.
democratization of information, knowledge, access. Two, hyperconnectivity is going to decentralize everything.
Sure.
Education will be decentralized, health will be decentralized, and it's good. It will create local jobs. And third, it will demonetize. Look, today telecom is almost free. Almost free. You and I can do this without any cost. Tomorrow, energy will be free. Day after tomorrow, transportation will be free. You'll be able to order a car on your phone and it'll come and take you wherever you want to go. What does it mean in that kind of an ecosystem?
Yeah.
And those are the issues I'm raising. I don't have answers to everything.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
I think, Sam, I think it's very interesting to hear, and we're going to come and have discussion about India specifically. But I think there is a very important point which you're raising at a very global front. You talked about that two kinds of thinking, which is an American thinking and a US thinking, and then you talked about ism. Yeah,
American
Chinese
and
thinking. Sorry,
yeah.
American and Chinese thinking. Then you talked about ism as in terms of what is capitalism, how what is socialism. And in your book, when I was reading, what intrigued me was the comparison which you do of the kind of socialist structures existed in Soviet Union and what was happening in China. Why Soviet Union kind of broken into different countries, and why China emerged as a great power, and at this point in time, whether it is a command and control, but it is a great power which is really one can reckon for. And I think in that context, you also talked about that what is the real model which is evolving, and that's where you're saying whether it is capitalism or socialism, that structure is really have no meaning. But you also talked about that within that context, what is the relevance of some of the large institutions such as UN, WTO, WHO, and I think perhaps somewhere you also suggesting there is a rise or suggestion for a new organization which can talk about emerging sort of structure, possibly valuing some of the things which you talked about, which is people and climate. Uh, when you actually put all of these in context and then try seeing that what is that real design which really the structure based on objective which you're setting up, what is that real design emerges? Is that a new organization, new governance, new power structure? And within that design, how do you reconcile with what is happening in a current context where there's things are really happening? China is building Belt and Road. The US is looking in terms of building organizations such as Quad, etc., with cooperation of many countries. How are these structure would play in this context of the new design you're talking about?
First of all, we must recognize that change is difficult. Change has to be driven by change agents. If we don't have change agents, there is no change. Today, everybody is driving in their traditional way, their agenda, and not global agenda. So when China says we have a vision, their vision is economic vision. Their vision has no social element. When America says we want to drive our vision, it has some social element in terms of democracy, human rights, but it stops there. So first, you need new set of pillars. You need an agreement on the new set of pillars for the design. And then once you agree on the new set of pillars, you need to worry about new organizational architecture. Without new organizational architecture, you cannot accomplish this. And I basically start with the fact that everything we do today is basically obsolete. Everything. Start with that. Then you begin to see direction. If you start with the fact that everything we do today is okay, you got a problem. Okay. So what is the new design? New design is take democracy, inclusion. So first, based on hyperconnectivity, I'm convinced that the world is going to be democratized. It may take 50 years. China also will have to pay attention to it in their own way of what is democracy. Democracy is not necessarily one definition, but it is basically to empower your people, give them freedom, give them options. When you tell me that I cannot travel to this part of country, I cannot move, I cannot decide who I want to be, what I want to work on, you are curbing my rights. You are controlling me. So I would say first pillar of the new design is to take democracy to inclusion. None of the democracies today are inclusive. US is not inclusive. You have seen Black Lives Matter issues here. India is not inclusive because we're still talking about, Hindu and caste and minorities. I mean, come on, grow up. Okay, these things don't matter anymore. We are all human beings. Don't tell me what to eat. Don't tell me where to go. Okay. So that's the first pillar is inclusion. And inclusion implies many things, not just economic inclusion, inclusion of opportunities. Okay. It requires respect, dignity for every human being. That's what inclusion is. Second, human rights are not good enough. We need human needs because today we can produce anything. We live in an economy of surplus and not economy of scarcity. So why do we have so many people hungry? Why do we have so many people homeless? Why do you have, in one neighborhood, 10 billionaires and everybody else lives in, slums? Why? Okay. So I think you need to take human rights to human needs. 3, capitalism is good, but it has created inequality. It's not good for everybody. Bottom-up approach is what we need. Top-down has not really percolated things to everybody. So we need new capitalism. We need capitalism that benefits everybody and not few. What is capitalism? Free movement of products and services and pricing and all that, which is good. But you need new capitalism. You can't just focus on gross development product. You got to focus on gross environmental product. You need to focus on gross human products. I mean, why do you have so many people in prison? I was watching on TV yesterday in US. There are a lot of murders going on here because of gun. So what's the solution? They're going to provide police better tools, better guns, more police. I mean, that's the solution they are coming up with. And everybody's saying, great idea. Nobody's talking about what is the root cause of this violence. So we wind up coming up with wrong solutions because we are trying to optimize financial model. Everything today is based on optimizing profits. Globalization went haywire because the equation was to optimize profit, not to optimize jobs, human well-beings. Okay. Then the whole idea of consumption that you mentioned earlier is not the answer. We cannot go on consuming only for few because we wind up producing only for people who can afford to buy and not for people who can afford to, who need it. So you have fashion industry, which is, billions and billions of dollars worth of fashion industry. So best brains in the world are busy solving problems of the rich who really don't have problems to solve. And as a result, problems of the poor don't get the right talent. And I've been saying this for the last 30, 40 years. Okay. So you need to move away from consumption to conservation and sustainability. Do I really need 200 shirts because I can afford to buy? Or I should really control after 10 shirts and say, I'm not buying any more shirts. But it's tough because we are trained to consume. Okay. Do I really need 5 cars? No, I don't need 5 cars, but I have it. Is it a good thing? No, it's not a good thing. Then why did you do it? Because everybody else has been doing it. One of the things during lockdown in Corona crisis is I started looking at my house and say, do I really need all these things? And I realized all of a sudden that 80% of the things I have in the house are useless. 80%. Okay. I need to really reduce my consumption. I realized that. I had no idea that I had done all this stuff. So I think we need to focus on conservation.
Sure.
And we need to focus on sustainability. And finally, military. Do we really need to spend $2 trillion in military? I'm sure all military people will justify that. Not a single global leader has talked about the fact that during Corona crisis, we'll reduce defense expenditure and we'll spend more money on health infrastructure. Nobody has said it. Why not? Somebody should have had guts to say, hey, I will take 20% of my defense budget and improve my health infrastructure going forward. What kind of leaders are these? But we respect them. We think they are great. I think there is a crisis of leadership in this world. Most of the leaders are petty, parochial, ignorant. Many are uneducated. They have no concept of complex systems. They make all kinds of promises and speeches that average person gets carried away with. They have no clue. They're a bunch of, I hate to say it this way, but they're a bunch of, know nothing. People vote for them. And that's the crisis they create for everybody. And that's what they get.
So Sam, I think the whole equity, sustainability, and the balance of the climate and people, which you talked about, and underlining or underpinning the whole idea of what is happening through a connectivity, hyper connectivity, people getting connected, unlike in the past where they were not had means to have communication. Uh, it has also had some flip side to it, Sam. What you see happening with some of these monolithic organizations, some of these large firms sitting and kind of building narrative. There are many countries who are really struggling with this, and including India, where they start shaping up. You saw what happened in during the U.S. election. We're seeing in many other countries some of this emerging conversation around the political narrative is being shaped by some of these trillion-dollar companies, which is again based on the same capitalist thinking or the US thinking, which really has emerged over the period of time. And that to balance saying that I would have a bottoms up thinking. So we thought that the connectivity, and as you were suggesting, the telecom connectivity would enable or empower that poor. And I think we resonate very well, Sam, because you and I come from states or the district, your district and my district is the poorest district of this country, even now. And our effort was this connectivity would actually be able to take information or knowledge to the citizens of Balangir or Saharsa, where I come from, and empower them and make them more. But instead, what we see these monolithic organization building a narrative and creating friction and a new way of actually, good or bad, we don't know. And it's up for a sort of discussion. But how do you kind of reconcile between the wrong side of it and what we thought could really happen with this hyperconnectivity?
Okay, it's like knife. It can cut fruits and it can kill somebody. We have to decide how we want to use this tool. China has done reasonably well in using this tool effectively by controlling who comes in, who doesn't come in. It is not about not respecting free market. It is about using your tool effectively to serve people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. So we have three elements in connectivity. One is the connectivity itself. Second is content. And third is context. We have not developed local content for local context. So somebody from outside is coming in and developing content for you and context for you because you haven't done it. Okay, what prevented India from doing Indian Twitter, Indian Facebook? Who prevented? Why isn't it in local language? Why isn't it promoting local culture? Okay. So you have this situation where you have allowed others to shape. And again, it is not against globalization. Please don't get me wrong. It is for localization. And it's wrong to assume that localization is against globalization. So to some extent, what is going on in the world today is a knee-jerk reaction to global connectivity. It will settle down over a period of time. People will begin to understand how to use connectivity for their benefit. We don't have good content today. We have not created or curated good content for local audience. So what happens? You have this fancy connectivity you use for Bollywood songs, cricket, and gossip. You don't use for agricultural farmer to improve his productivity. You don't use to build better family. You don't use for mathematics, physics. You don't use properly for health. I hope it will change. I'm confident that it will change over a period of time.
Yeah, this whole context and the content sort of discussion is very interesting, Sam. In fact, to me, and before we go to the audience and take more questions from them, I think one of the things which is actually
I have a hard sort of time problem at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, so we've got another 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Yeah, so I'm going to take the questions from the audience, and I think Dilip is also joined in on the conversation. Yeah, so
I hope this was useful, Ratnesh.
Yeah, all of this is a very, very. In fact, the audience is quite a versatile audience. You have youngsters as well as people who come in from the FICCI community, as well as many of the thinkers joining. And I think it's been a great discussion so far, Sam.
Oh, FICCI has contributed a lot to India. I'm proud of the fact that I had an opportunity to speak at FICCI many, many times in 80s, in Rajiv Gandhi's time. You guys have built a great organization. My compliments. And, FICCI has been an important part of Indian, growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And I think we take that as a compliment. And I think Dilip is there, as I said. We'll come to the audience question. And if Dilip has any question, he can also ask you. But one question, which is my last question, to me, it seems like a recipe to follow, where I have a pick up something from a Chinese dish, from a Japanese dish, and from a continental, and try making something which is. So when you say that we should actually follow what China has done for what they've kind of made their own system of, these platforms, and
Saying
what
that
we
I'm
should
saying,
learn.
look at what they did. I'm saying look at what they did. I'm not saying just go follow blindly.
Sure,
Okay.
sure, sure. So perhaps some kind of a structure or something which is more sort of coming out of India, and pick up something which is happening in the other parts of the world, and try see if we can make a structure and put that with the global governance and global structure. One question which I have, which is the last question for me, is is that a global governance and global structure, or is that we can optimize the existing structure of what is exist right now within the nation? And why I say that, I'll just give you a context. Because if we start actually questioning the whole federated structure, then I think it'll start from the world and it'll go to the country. Are we saying the command and
That's
control
not.
in the country?
Okay. It is global government is not about governing local events and local prospect. Global government is only to coordinate global needs. Global government should really focus on what is good for planet and what is good for people. Local government has to execute and implement. But global government cannot talk about only their interest. Today, all these global meetings are for national interest, not for global interest. When G20 meet or G7 meet, they talk about local issues. They don't talk about global issues mainly. And global governance does not imply a massive government structure like EU has done. No, it's all virtual. Okay. So I think we need to think globally and act locally.
Sure. So essentially, the structure could be the same, but the narrative needs to change. Is that what you suggest?
Yes, and also you look at constitutions. Is there a global constitution? Can we begin with a global constitution that we respect life, that we respect planet, environment? Can we begin a conversation on global constitution? Not that everybody will agree to everything, but everybody will agree to something. What is that something? And can we have a conversation for 5 years on global constitution? But you got to start all this somewhere. Don't expect these things to happen overnight, but make it happen.
Sure. I think one of the things which was left in our discussion, and I think, Dilip, you have a question. I'll go to you. There is a question on education system, I think, which can
Sure.
follow. I don't know whether we can get a question or something from Dilip. Are you there?
I'm an insider to this story, so I would not like to, ask a question right at this point of time. I'd like to give the members the opportunity to ask questions and go ahead. So, right.
Thank you,
Sure.
Dilip. Thanks for the opportunity, Dilip. You
No, no.
organized this. I really
No.
appreciate that.
I have a chance of nearly every week interacting with Sam in a different forum and, learning a lot. So, but I think members will have the first right of questions, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dilip. I think the one of the questions which is coming, Sam, I'll just read that out. What is your take on complete shift that our education system has witnessed in the last 15 months or over the last, COVID times? And I think this is contextual to India, but you can also give a reference to what is happening in the other parts of the world and what you have actually learned from there.
I have 3 or 4 pages on education in the book on a chapter on innovation. In a chapter on innovation. Education is broken everywhere. Education is too expensive. It has limited access. At times it is not relevant. And it is not using the technology available today. So at the end of the day, education is all about 3 things: motivation, time, and content. Can you make me self-learner? If technology can make me self-learner, I will decide what to learn, when to learn, at what pace I want to learn. So this idea of 4 years to get a degree, 2 years to get a master's, the whole world follows that. I want to question that. I want to question the basic idea of education where you spend $200,000 to get an MBA. I mean, what kind of education system is that? So education system needs reforms everywhere. In India, during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, we had this group called National Knowledge Commission. We put together a blueprint, but it's very difficult to execute because there is no political will to execute things like that. So I think education has to be transformed completely. And we have learned during Corona crisis what can be done with technology. Not that it's going to solve all the problems, but it's a tool that we are not using effectively. And learning doesn't happen in school only. Learning happens at home. Learning happens in your backyard. Learning happens on street. Learning happens from your grandparents. Okay. So it's wrong to assume that learning only happens in school.
Thanks, Sam. In fact, there are a lot of questions coming in, but I'm going to put that as a rapid fire for you. I will just give you a word and what comes in your mind if you can speak. Democracy.
Sure. Everybody should follow democracy because it has a power to empower a human being and let you experience life the way you want to experience.
China.
Rising power.
India in last 10 years.
Confusing.
USA today.
Looking for a new path.
The best world leader in contemporary time.
Mahatma Gandhi.
Climate.
Great concern for the world. Threat to our civilization.
Post-COVID.
Time to rethink. Time
UN
to
Security
evaluate.
Council. UN Security Council.
Have not been able to prevent wars.
Thank you, Sam. The last question which I have now for you, and I think I know that you are, the time is important and we are running, we have 6 minutes more left. How can Indian youth play an important role towards better and more sustainable future? That's the question. Indian youth.
I have great faith in Indian youth. I have benefited from their energy work at CDOT, CDAC, everywhere, even in Knowledge Commission. They have unique energy, unique perspective. They need to be the change agents. They need to be change agents in India, in their local community, in their districts, in their schools, at their work. They got to think differently. They cannot follow their parents or their teachers. Some amount of energy has to be put into being rebel, because change requires few rebels. Without rebels, there is no change. But that doesn't mean they are not disciplined. So I have great faith in Indian youth, and I think they can change the world if they decide to change. But they haven't decided yet what they want to do. They get sucked into all this terrible narrative of decisive politics, of petty, attacks, of lies. And it bothers me that our young get trapped in these wrong narratives. They got to rise above all this and look at future in a very different way.
Sandra, very interesting question. All our present day ills have been caused by hubris on part of us humans. How can we move from hubris to humility and humanity? And some of this you already have kind of spoken about. But
I think for things to change, each one of us will have to change. We can't expect things to change if we don't change. So change has to begin from within. Each one of us will have to say, I respect other human beings. I am for inclusion. I don't like violence. I will not lie. I will not cheat. I will not promise people I can't deliver. I'll be fair. I will communicate. I will collaborate. I think If enough of us do that, world will change. We make the world, but we can't be hypocrites. Many times people come and tell me about corruption, but they are themselves corrupt. What are you complaining? Go look inside. You are corrupt and you are complaining about corruption. So I think change has to begin from within. It can happen. How did we mobilize public opinion during independence movement? I think we need that kind of a movement. We need another movement to save our planet and uplift our humanity. We need a movement that affects especially people at the bottom of the economic pyramid, because it is in my interest and your interest to make sure that they are well off. We need a movement that respects everybody, irrespective of their religion, their race, their color, their gender. Can be done. But we are the one who discriminate people. We are the one who create inequality. So I think Indian youth can play a very important role. I also see a lot of questions here. Maybe we need another session just on questions.
Correct.
I
No,
screen a lot of interesting questions, and I feel bad that I have to leave in 2 minutes, Ratnesh.
Yeah, so I think we have 2 minutes left, but I think we've had, on behalf of Vicky, I must tell you that I personally enjoyed talking to you, but I think everybody I see a lot of positive questions, and as you said, we perhaps need to do another session.
Have another session at some time just to answer these questions. I'll be happy to do it, because
yes,
I also learned from these questions. Okay.
Yeah. So over to you, Dilip. The last words from you. I know that you've been having conversations every week, but I think it's a good occasion because every member.
No, I'm very conscious about Sam's time. I just want to thank him for joining us and being his usual free and frank, forthright, an expressive self. He took a lot of time to think about this book. He's actually related it to his life's journey, and all the institutions. So thank you, Sam, for doing this for us, and thank you, Ratnesh, for actually moderating this and doing this and really preparing for it well. And we're going to take you up on that offer to answer the questions. And thank you, Sumit and team, for working on this. And thank you, all of you who have joined to listen to Sam and taking this conversation forward. Thank you, and leave you for your next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.